Ryan Finkelstein, host of Locked On Mets, here in my sister's garage, in my brother-in-law's car. The nephews are sleeping in the house. Audio only today for Locked On Mets. Just finished up recording, talking about the home run derby. Pete Alonso's crown is gone, but did it go to a future Met and Juan Soto? We'll be discussing that. We'll be discussing mock trades. A lot of good stuff on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Well, Pete Alonso gave up his home run derby crown on Monday night after a long reign presiding over the event dating back to 2019. Luckily, though, another Met won it. Oh, wait a minute. Juan Soto's not a Met yet, but could he be soon? On the show today in the first segment, we'll talk about the derby, but I can't stop thinking about what Juan Soto would look like in a Mets uniform, particularly as we see Starling Marte celebrate the derby win with him in the final two segments. We're going to talk more about Soto to the Mets, and I'll do some mock trades that could land him in Queens. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, you look at the Derby field, and you had the Kyle Schwarber, Albert Pujols battle for the nostalgia. Somehow Pujols edges out Schwarber. Not a great performance by him or his pitching coach there, whoever was throwing to him. Not strong effort on their part. Allowed Pujols to win, but give him credit. He really did a nice job in that little bonus round, and he even gave Juan Soto a run for his money in round two. You look at Soto versus Ramirez, a good battle. Soto ends up walking that one off at the last second. Earlier on in the competition, you had the other side of the bracket, Julio Rodriguez versus Corey Seager, and Rodriguez put on a show. I'll tell you, you talk about BetOnline, and I'm sorry to all of you I was advising to bet on Pete Alonso. It served me well the last two times I did. This time, third time was not a charm. But Julio Rodriguez at plus 1,000 was a really good bet that I did place, and it looked really good until that final round because Rodriguez put on an absolute show, hit 32 home runs in the first round to edge out Corey Seager, then hit 31 home runs in round two to beat Pete Alonso. Alonso looked okay. He never quite looked comfortable in this derby. They made a lot about Dave Joust and the fact that he was no longer with the Mets. And, last year, Joust was throwing Alonso BP all the time, so maybe their chemistry wasn't as good. I don't know about that. I mean, I didn't think that Joust was that bad as far as the pitching is concerned. Was it a little bit slower than J-Rod's pitching guy, who, I tweeted this out, he had that basically nonchalant, I guess is the PG way to phrase what Julio Rodriguez's pitching coach was kind of giving off. It was more like he just didn't care at all. No kick, no motion, just casual flipping balls. And there's someone commented on my post and said it looked like a guy who's flipping like cornhole in the backyard. Very similar to that. Like, just here it is on a tee for you. No motion, all arm action. He was really impressive. Sometimes it's the pitchers that can really decide a derby. And for Rodriguez, he got great pitching, but this guy is an unbelievable talent. I wrote an article for Just Base about Julio Rodriguez in his season. If you look at his numbers, the first month, not great. Since then, he's been one of the best outfielders in baseball if you really look at everything. And honestly, I would not be surprised if this time next year where Rodriguez is hosting the not the home run derby. Well, I guess he will host the home run derby, but hosting the All-Star festivities in Seattle. If we're talking about this guy as a top 5 player in baseball, that's how good he is. Pete comes up short against him. So it's unfortunate. He still hit 23 home runs in that second round. Not his best derby performance. I'm sure he'll do it again. He loves the event. He'll still have more opportunities to match Ken Griffey Jr. for the most Derby wins ever at 3. Griffey didn't do it 3 years in a row either, so Pete doesn't get the opportunity to literally three-peat, but I'm sure he'll be back at it. It'll always be fun. I always get way too nervous watching Pete up there, but it is what it is. It's an exhibition. Unfortunately, if you bet on it, I apologize if you took my advice and I led you astray. I thought it was a lock. I really did, but after that first round, the fact that he was going up against J-Rod, I was sweating bullets throughout the whole thing there, and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. In the final round, though, we got to see future Met Juan Soto going up against Julio Rodriguez, and I shouldn't say that so flippantly, but man, the way Twitter has kind of wrapped ourselves around it, if you're talking about Mets Twitter, everyone's kind of trying to will this thing into existence, and it's hard not to today when you see them go through media and they put Juan Soto next to Pete Alonso before the Derby, and they're having an interview, and you also had before that interaction with Edwin Diaz, and you got reporters asking questions about Juan Soto about playing in New York, and you see Starling Marte, really embracing him, fellow Dominican. Just interesting to see how this is playing out here. And as we lead into Juan Soto trade talk, here's what I'll say. What I found today after Juan Soto mentioned that he loves hitting at Citi Field is if you look at his OPS in other ballparks around baseball, there's only 2 ballparks where he has hit better. Great American Ballpark, where everybody hits incredible, and that's in 11 games. He had 1 series that he raked at Yankee Stadium. The most success he's had in any ballpark in baseball is Citi Field, an OPS of nearly 12,000 or 1,200, OPS plus of 140, 10 home runs. He's hitting 350 at Citi Field. So I think he would do pretty good in a Mets uniform if I had to go out on a limb. And it was really weird that I had money on Julio Rodriguez in this event. Like I said, he was my flyer. I had... the real money was on Pete, but if Julio Rodriguez had won that thing, I would have broken even, if not a little bit ahead. And to see the fact that I'm out there and I'm rooting for a national in the home run derby, suddenly I love Juan Soto. Not that I ever had anything against him, although if you're playing against Juan Soto and he does that Soto shuffle where he stares down the pitcher, it's the most obnoxious thing ever. I'm not going to lie, even in MLB The Show, there has been times where he'll do the Soto shuffle on me, and this is a video game, and I get so mad I throw at his head because, again, it's a video game. But when he's on your team, the Soto shuffle is nothing but moxie. You like to see it. Here's your guy, and man, the more I think about this, I can't stop thinking about the possibilities here. And we're about to talk in a minute here what the trade packages would be and why the Mets would do it. But it's just this fact that if you're all in, you have an opportunity to get a player that can swing the tides of this pennant race more than anyone else in baseball. Right now, before this, we were talking at Just Baseball, our top 20 trade deadline, assets that are available. It's an article we have out there that you can find right at justbaseball.com at the top of the page there. And our top 2 assets that we talked about was Frankie Montes and Luis Castillo, 2 guys that I don't think fit the Mets because their starting pitching has been so good. Juan Soto now skyrockets to the top of that list. And with that said, if you are all in, this is the guy you go out and get if you're Steve Cohen. The question is, how much is it going to cost? And the other question is, what would he look like in a Mets uniform? How would that fit? So I'm going to talk about that first, then we'll get through some mock trades to close out the show. Before we do any of that, if you're ready to pop the question or if you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. There you can build the engagement ring of her dreams, as Blue Nile has simple online tools to let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind, so you can celebrate life special moments with fine jewelry by going to Blue Nile, where they have jewelry experts on hand 24/7 available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Mets listeners can get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement, so use the code Locked On. Again, that's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress free and find your forever peace by going to BlueNile.com today. All right. More Juan Soto talk here. I will be honest to listeners here. I am on vacation. I think I've mentioned that. So, this was a podcast today where I was just like, originally going to talk about Pete Alonso and do a deep dive into his season statistically, but for my vacation, I just want to talk about the thing that is most interesting to me right now. And again, this idea of getting Juan Soto, I know I said this on yesterday's show, but it bears repeating here. It's an opportunity to trade for someone that's going to go into Cooperstown with the Mets hat in 20 years. Almost guaranteed. That's how talented this guy is. You just saw it on full display on a big stage. This guy is going to perform if you acquire him. I'm not even worried about that. I'm not worried about can he play in New York. The guy is a mega superstar. If you were to just power rank all the players in baseball right now and say, who's going to have the best decade following right now? If we're starting the clock right now, who is the best hitter for the next decade? Who are you taking above Juan Soto? I mean, we just saw one guy, Julio Rodriguez. Look, guy has a ton of talent, maybe. Mike Trout's Mike Trout, but is he quite in his 30s? If he's not in his 30s, he'll be in his 30s soon. What's his next 10 years going to look like? Next 5, okay. Shohei Ohtani's great. Has holes in his swing that I think Juan Soto does not. You just go through it, and as much as you can like the Ronald Acuna Jr.'s of the world, there's something about this guy. It's the plate discipline, it's the eye, it's the power, it's all of it, and he's doing it right now in a lineup where he's got Josh Bell and nothing around him, and so you add him in to a playoff chase. You reunite him with former teammate Max Scherzer, with his buddy Starling Marte. We saw today how tight they apparently are, with Pete Alonso, with Francisco Lindor, a star-studded team in a pennant race, in a division where he knows all the pitchers already, where he's comfortable, the transition would be smooth. And then you talk about what he's done in the playoffs. As a 20-year-old, he helped lead his team to a World Series. And you said, was he really that big of a guy? That year, Anthony Rendon was maybe their most valuable hitter, and there was other guys contributing, and Howie Kendrick was on a different level. I think he might have won the NLCS MVP, if I'm not mistaken. The pitchers were great that year. Still, you look at his stats in the playoffs as a 20-year-old, mind you, in what was his second season. He had 277, 373 on base, 554 slugging in the playoffs. In the World Series, he had 3 home runs, hit 333, 438 on base, 741 slugging in the World Series. And if you really looked at the breakdown, he had a bad championship round against the Cardinals, but that was a 4-game sweep. And in the first round against the Dodgers, he was amazing when obviously that was the most pressure-packed series I think they probably played, either that one or the final one against the Astros. And in those huge moments, the guy rose to the occasion. So if you are an all-in win-now team that wants a World Series and you're Steve Cohen, are we going to be surprised that they do this? Because I remember originally talking, in the offseason about how Max Scherzer would never be a Met. He's a Met. So now I sit here and can I really brush aside these rumors and these rumblings? Because you look at who else can make the trade. Yeah, the Dodgers can make the trade. And if they make the trade, great. In the championship series this year, maybe you're competing against Juan Soto, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Trey Turner. I mean, that team's already loaded. You're talking about the Braves and who's on that team, and you're trying to win this division. Ronald Acuna Jr. is a great player. They got an MVP talent there. We'll see if he can, be that in the second half for them. And they have a lot of other guys as well that have really stepped up. The Mets lineup, we've talked about it. They need a jolt. And as much as we could talk about, maybe the Mets trade with the Nationals to get Josh Bell, what does that really do for you? And do you know he's going to be good? Because I'll be honest, as much as Josh Bell's been great this year, he is a guy that has had a lot of seasons where he has one good half, one bad half. Look at his first All-Star season in 2019. So I just think that this is one of those situations here where if you look at the bats that are on the market and you think the Mets need to add somebody. And honestly, I will say, on the show tomorrow, I'm going to do more trade stuff. Not going to focus in on Juan Soto again. I think 2 episodes is enough this week, unless some news breaks. But what I want to do is, because we're going to have the All-Star game, I want to talk about what players could be available at the deadline that could complement the Mets all-stars. And also in that, you kind of include the starting rotation, some of the all-star talent there. But just the idea of the fact that the Mets have a lot of really good players, what's left that needs to complement them. So we're going to go through some more realistic options, but everybody I talk about tomorrow is nowhere near on the level of a Juan Soto to complement this roster. And I mean, you're trading for a guy that would become your best player. That just does not happen. Never does that happen at the deadline. It's like Alex Rodriguez, if he were to move at the deadline in his prime. It's so rare. And I said it on yesterday's show, but then you kind of look at the lineup that can put out, and the top six is what is so tantalizing to me. We already have seen this year that Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Francisco Lindor, and Pete Alonso as a top four has been really strong, and Jeff McNeil, whether he's hitting 5th, 8th, or wherever, has been extremely solid as well. So the Mets have 5 hitters right now that I think you feel really confident in. Mark Canha gets on base at a good clip. So you like that, but you look at the rest of the Mets roster right now and it's weak. You add in Juan Soto and it lengthens the lineup, and suddenly you got Lindor probably batting 5th instead of 3rd because Soto is going to be in that spot, and you got Jeff McNeil batting 6th, and then if you want to go out and you want to put Mark Canha in left field, Soto can DH and Canha can be in the lineup, and you figure out what you do. But if it's Eduardo Escobar at third base, or maybe it's Louis Guillorme, if you want to go all defense there, you can make the lineup look like that. You could put Guillorme at second, McNeil in left, bench Canha, have Soto be the DH. You could have Soto in left field. You could bench Canha, have McNeil at second, Escobar at third, and who knows, you could put at DH. Maybe you hang on to Mark Vientos in the trade, and maybe he's your DH still. So there's so many ways the Mets can play with their roster if they get Juan Soto, but the bottom line is you're getting an MVP-type player at the deadline to pair with a team that hopefully would still be in first place and is right there with the Dodgers as the best team in the National League. Now, that makes you a favorite, and you know that Steve Cohen is all about making these big moves. The real question here is, what do you have to give up to make it happen? The one way that you can lessen the value given up in this trade is taking on Patrick Corbin's contract. So I want to talk about that and some of the packages that could go the other way to make this dream a reality. Before we get to that, though, let me tell you about the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, which of course is Built Bar. And I don't know if you tried it yet, but they have the amazing new Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar. They also have the Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff Built Bar. The Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallows. They're fluffy, they're delicious, they all come low in calories, low in sugar, but they're high in protein and high in fiber, and they come covered in that 100% real chocolate. The Coconut Brownie Chunk Puffs are only here for a limited time, so go to Built.com now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they just taste that amazing, and all Built Bars are made with a collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently to provide tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. The Built Bar Puffs are where it's at. If you want to try them today, go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. So before we talk about the Patrick Corbin element to this trade, let's just go through what a Juan Soto package alone would look like for the Mets to land him. So in my opinion, and we're going to talk a lot about Alvarez here, that's the piece that gets this thing done. It's trading Francisco Alvarez, which is really unfortunate. I'm not even going to talk about the fact the Mets just drafted a catcher in the first round. I know some people are linking those two things. Look, the Mets draft, as most smart teams do, based on whoever they had the highest on their board. Most prospects are still going to take 2 or 3 years, even the college guys, to make it to the big leagues. You don't draft for need. You draft whoever is the best player available. If a catcher is the best player available, even if your top prospect is a catcher, you draft him because either A, Alvarez doesn't actually pan out the way you think he will, or B, he pans out that way. You don't need a catcher, but you develop a catcher that could be one of the best prospects in baseball. And then the next time a Juan Soto becomes available, here you go, you got a guy you can trade. So I'm not going to go through that. We are going to talk the draft later on this week with Jordan Grossman for a Friday Farm Report. But when it comes to this package, if you start with Francisco Alvarez, that is what makes this conversation interesting for the Nationals. Now, again, this is the package without Patrick Corbin. It probably includes Brett Baty. It includes Ronnie Mauricio. And honestly, I think it includes either Alex Ramirez or Mark Vientos. Now, I think that you can maybe hang on to Vientos by subbing Ramirez in the package. It's a potential 5-tool center fielder. But again, he's 19 years old. He's far away. If you are trying to win now, maybe you want to hang on to Vientos for this season and also for beyond as a potential DH. So let's just say that's the main framework of the deal. It's Alvarez, it's Baty, it's Mauricio, it's Alex Ramirez. That's a ton. I still don't think that's enough. They're going to want a major arm in this deal. They're going to want a pitcher. Now, today, Buster Olney, who, as much as I don't want to knock someone who's had a long career as a reporter, I just don't ever fully believe his reporting sometimes. I don't know. Sorry. I had to throw it out there because I don't want to run with what he said. He said that they're looking for close to MLB talent. Maybe. But at the same time, if you're the Nationals, you're not going to get 10 for the next 5 years anyway. Why do you care how close the MLB talent really is? So, maybe they want to get an established MLB player, but anyone who's making this trade at the deadline does not want to gut their roster to acquire a player that they're trying to help, win this season with. So, in this case, one major arm going back, maybe it would be a David Peterson or a Tyler McGill, but I think the Mets would want to hold those guys because of this season, and then, of course, they're going to help you beyond that. If that's the thing that gets the deal done, though, you do it. Other than that, though, you got Calvin Ziegler, you got Dominic Hamill, you got Jose Butto. Those are some of the other top pitching prospects the Mets have. Matt Allen, I think, would probably be off the table in these talks. For one, who knows if a team really wants to acquire a guy that is still coming off Tommy John surgery. Two, I think because of that injury status, the Mets can kind of stock him away, and I think they would like to avoid dealing him. So if you're talking about maybe one of those guys, and that still might not be enough to completely get it done, they might want a second arm, but I think you can trade a less significant one as that second arm. So it would be, again, Alvarez, Baty, Mauricio, Alex Ramirez, plus an arm of David Peterson, Tyler McGill, Ziegler, Hamill, or Butto, and then maybe like a lower level lottery ticket arm. So it's 6-for-1 trade, which sounds crazy, but this is the best trade asset in MLB history. I'm not even kidding about that. It just doesn't happen that a 23-year-old becomes available. And obviously you're trading with 2.5 years of control, so you don't have to give him an extension right now. The Mets obviously would, and then you're talking about potentially 15 years of a guy, and I know some people say that's a really long contract. The guy would be great for the first decade of it, right? And there's a chance a generational talent could be good into his 30s as well. You look at Starling Marte right now, what is he, 32, 33, still being successful. Soto would already be through 2/3 of the contract by the time he got to that age. So that's the big package, right? Maybe also I will say, if I'm Billy Epler and I'm not as worried about having Vientos be part of this year's team because I'm getting freaking Juan Soto, maybe I try to have Vientos be that piece instead of Brett Baty, and I try my damnedest to hold on to the other top prospect in my system. That would be ideal. If you're going to trade Francisco Alvarez, try to hang on to Brett Baty for all you can, because at least you have an opportunity there to have a guy that maybe starting next year could be your third baseman. I had the non-Alvarez package here. This is before we get into the Corbin wrinkle. That's going to be Brett Baty, okay? Ronnie Mauricio, Mark Vientos, Alex Ramirez, no doubt about it. All four of them have to be included if you're somehow going to hang on to Francisco Alvarez. And then I think you need to give up two of the big arms that we talked about there, whether it's Ziegler, Peterson, McGill, Butto, Hamill. You're going to have to trade to some pitching here in that type of a deal. And I still can't see any possibility where you can acquire Juan Soto without trading Francisco Alvarez in general, but definitely if Patrick Corbin's not in the deal. This is where things get interesting. We've seen the Dodgers do this time and again. When they got Mookie Betts, they got David Price in the trade. No, that's not because they thought David Price was good. It's because the Red Sox didn't want to pay David Price anymore. That's where they're at with Patrick Corbin. This guy's owed over $23 million this year, over $24 million next year, and that is basically a $24 million base and then the fraction of his signing bonus that is left, which is just over $400K. Then you got $35 million of a poison pill in 2024. His ERA is 5.87 this year. The guy's terrible at this point. And I was talking to somebody today about him being a loogie for the Mets, a guy that can get lefties out. I think lefties are hitting like 320 against him this year. So, I mean, he's a guy where you trade for him. You stash him in your bullpen as a long man because you can't just eat all that money right away, and then you hope he gets injured and you can stash him on the IL, which sounds bad, but honestly, I just don't know what you have when it comes to Corbin giving you anything over the next 3 years. But you're basically doing this so you can lessen the prospect return. So here's what a Soto-Corbin package could look like. Francisco Alvarez, Ronnie Mauricio, Alex Ramirez, Ziegler, or Hamill, or Mike Vassell, or Jose Budo, another arm, but a prospect. We're not talking Peterson or McGill in this situation. And then the lower level lottery ticket or two. All right? So in that sense, by taking on Corbin's contract, it would be more of a 3-for-1 when it comes to your major prospects. And you can hang on to Brett Baty potentially, and maybe even Mark Vientos as well. Alvarez is the big headliner they get back. They get huge financial relief. They get Ronnie Mauricio as a guy that has a ton of potential. They get Alex Ramirez as another one that has a lot of potential. And then they get an arm or two. And then again, maybe you also have some lottery tickets thrown in. I also will say guys like J.D. Davis or Dominic Smith could be in any of these trades as a major league name that can go back to the Nationals fan base. A change of scenery for them could be good. They're looking as a rebuilding team to try to rebuild those guys' value and maybe flip them at next year's deadline. That's where they would be at with a piece of that type going in this type of a deal. But that is the Soto-Corbin wrinkle. And then, again, maybe you can hang on to Alvarez in this sense if the package is set around a Brett Baty. But I think even in that sense, you're going to have to give up a lot more if Alvarez is not on the table in these talks. Alvarez is what gets this deal done, in my opinion. I don't think it happens without him. But I do think that if you take on Corbin and you trade Alvarez, you can get out of this with the farm system still intact. If you give up Ronnie Mauricio, who has any long-time Locked On Mets listener knows I'm not the highest on, and Alex Ramirez, a guy who could be great but is really far away still, even though he's now in high A, he's still 19, right? That's 3 prospects that obviously hurt, but you're getting a guy that immediately makes you, if not a World Series favorite, right on the same level as the Dodgers, as the Astros, as the Yankees. And I think the Mets, even though they've been great this season, are still a slight tick below those top-tier teams. It's slight, but their lineup is just coming up a little bit short right now. So that is how you can get a deal done. I think you got to take back Corbin because it's going to really help you when it comes to the prospect return you have to give up. And I think you're going to have to give up Alvarez to get a deal done. But if you can come out of this with Juan Soto and hang on to Brett Baty and Mark Vientos, if that's even remotely possible, this is something you really got to be excited about. And again, maybe you do have to give up a Vientos or a Baty with an Alvarez, but let's just say that's the case. Let's say it's Alvarez and Baty and you're taking back Soto and Corbin. I don't think you have to give up much more of consequence beyond that, because Baty and Alvarez are that good of prospects. Maybe you still include Mauricio, but you can hang on to a Ramirez in that sense. There's a lot of different things that can happen here. It has to hurt really bad if it's going to be a fair trade. That's how you have to look at it as a fan. If it's a trade that you think, oh yeah, I'm cool with it, it's not a trade that's realistic. So I'm giving you trades that I think are realistic. Maybe I'm putting too much on the table here. I don't know. But again, as we talk about the 2022 Mets, if you want them to be World Series champions, you got to give to get, and this guy is worth giving up a lot for. Anyway, that's going to be all for the show today. As I said throughout the week, a lot more deadline talk. Tomorrow's show, what deadline acquisitions can complement the Mets All-Stars. And then, we're going to close out the week with the Friday Farm Report talking about the draft. And in between, probably some more stuff we will get into when it comes to the approaching deadline, which is obviously of utter importance to this Mets team. As always, thank you for making this your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. He'll have you covered with everything going on in the MLB draft. Make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, following me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan, and following the show at Locked On Mets.